For decades, the Navy's official report on Flight 19 was classified. When the file was finally opened, one bizarre phrase was all that remained, as if they had flown to Mars. The war was over. By December of 1945, the United States Navy was transitioning from global conflict to the vigilance of peace. The immense pressure of combat had been replaced by a new kind of intensity, the drive to perfect the lessons learned and to train a generation of pilots for a new era. At Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the atmosphere was one of disciplined routine. The airmen stationed there were not novices. Many were combat veterans, their skills tested over hostile seas, now serving as instructors. The mission on December 5th was the definition of ordinary, a simple but essential exercise officially known as Navigation Problem Number 1. It was a flight plan executed thousands of times by pilots up and down the coast. The aircraft assigned to the mission were Grumman TBM Avenger torpedo bombers. The Grumman TBM Avenger was a rugged three-man warplane. Its design emphasized survivability and a heavy payload, making it one of the most reliable aircraft in the naval fleet. These were large, single-engine planes, weighing over 10,000 pounds empty, and they were trusted implicitly by the men who flew them. The 5 planes of Flight 19 were in excellent condition, having been inspected and topped with enough fuel for over 5 hours of flight time. Leading them was US Navy Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, an aviator with extensive experience and a veteran of the Pacific Theater. He was an expert in the Avenger, but one detail about Taylor's recent history would make him dangerously vulnerable on this specific, routine flight. He was a recent transfer to Fort Lauderdale and was not deeply familiar with the local geography, particularly the deceptive similarity of the Bahama Islands that dotted the flight path. The flight plan was a perfect triangle traced over the open ocean. From Fort Lauderdale, they would fly east for 141 miles. This route would take them over the Grand Bahama Island. After reaching a specific point, they would conduct a practice bombing run at a location called Hens and Chicken Shoals. From there, they would turn sharply north for 73 miles. The final leg of the journey was a 140-mile straight line, a direct course back to the air station. The exercise involved 5 powerful aircraft and 14 experienced airmen, all under a combat-tested leader. The flight was expected to last just 2 hours. It was a perfect day for flying. At 2:10 p.m., under a bright, clear sky, the 5 bombers of Flight 19 roared to life. One by one, they lifted off the runway, formed up over the coast, and headed east, out over the vast, shimmering expanse of the Atlantic. The squadron consisted of 4 student pilots, each commanding their own Avenger with 2 crewmen, and Lieutenant Taylor, flying as the instructor in the lead plane with a single crewman. For the first hour and a half, the mission proceeded exactly as planned. Radio communications were routine. They reached the bombing shoals, released their practice bombs successfully, and banked north for the second, shorter leg of their journey. All was well. The first hint of trouble arrived at the Fort Lauderdale control tower just before 4 p.m. It was a radio transmission from Lieutenant Taylor, his voice laced with a calm but profound confusion. He reported that both of his compasses, the primary magnetic compass and the backup gyro compass, were malfunctioning. He was lost. Instrument failure was a known risk. Every pilot was trained to navigate by other means. But what followed was a cascade of errors rooted in a single, fatal misjudgment. Taylor believed he was somewhere over the Florida Keys, hundreds of miles south of his actual position. Every decision he made from that point on was based on this fundamental error. He was convinced that to get home, he needed to fly northeast. From the Florida Keys, that heading would have taken him safely over the Florida Peninsula. From his actual position, east of the Bahamas, it was taking him and his men deeper into the empty ocean. The radio transmissions from 4 p.m. revealed a terrifying fact. The other 4 pilots seemed to have working instruments. This presents the central, haunting question of the tragedy. With functional compasses aboard 4 other planes, why did every single pilot follow their leader deeper into the empty ocean? The answer lies in the rigid structure of military command. Naval protocol was clear. You follow the leader. The student pilots, despite their own instruments telling them something different, deferred to their experienced combat instructor. One pilot could be heard advising Taylor, "If we would just fly west, we would get home." Taylor's reply was adamant. He was the leader. He was in command. On the ground, a frantic effort was underway. Controllers at multiple air stations scrambled to get a fix on the lost flight. They could hear the pilots talking to each other, their voices a mixture of professional discipline and rising anxiety. The controllers on the ground had a different problem. Flight 19 was using a standard training frequency, which was crowded with radio traffic from other planes and stations. This made it difficult to get a clear signal or a solid radio direction-finding lock on their position. As the afternoon wore on, The situation deteriorated. The perfect flying weather began to turn. The Atlantic is subject to sudden, violent storms, and the Gulf Stream can create sharp, unpredictable changes in local weather conditions. Flight 19 was now flying into high winds, rising seas, and darkening skies. Their radio transmissions grew fainter, distorted by distance and static. Controllers pleaded with them to turn on their emergency transmitters, which broadcast on a clearer, dedicated frequency. For reasons that remain unknown, the command was never given. Taylor's confidence, once so absolute, began to fray. In one transmission, he was heard handing over command to another pilot, only to take it back minutes later. The squadron flew east, then west, then east again, a series of aimless, fuel-consuming maneuvers born of their leader's complete spatial disorientation. The sun began to set, plunging the sky and the sea below into an inky, indistinguishable blackness. They were now flying blind in bad weather, with no visual references and a dwindling supply of fuel. The final communications from Flight 19 are a chilling record of their descent. They discussed their fuel levels. They knew they would soon have to ditch their planes in the ocean. The Avenger, a heavy aircraft laden with an engine block of solid steel, was known to sink rapidly upon hitting the water. Ditching the Avenger in calm, sunlit seas was a hazardous gamble. Attempting it at night, amidst a growing storm, offered virtually no chance of survival. Around 7:04 p.m., the last clear transmission was heard from Lieutenant Taylor. He was calm, resolute, giving his final command. When the first plane's fuel dropped below 10 gallons, they would all go down together. Then there was only static. The 5 warplanes and the 14 men inside them had vanished. Back at Fort Lauderdale, the silence from Flight 19 triggered an immediate, full-scale alert. Within minutes of their last transmission, a rescue mission was airborne. A PBM Martin Mariner flying boat was dispatched to begin searching the area where Flight 19 was presumed to be. The Martin Mariner was a massive, capable search and rescue aircraft, able to land on water and stay aloft for long patrols. But this specific model of aircraft carried a well-known design flaw, earning it a grim nickname among pilots, the flying gas tank. Its wings were filled with enormous fuel bladders, and historical reports indicated that they were vulnerable to sparks from the plane's own systems. A nickname that would prove prophetic just 23 minutes later. The Mariner, designated Trainer 49, lifted off from the Banana River Naval Air Station at 7:27 p.m. with a crew of 13 men. They were flying into the same deteriorating weather that had claimed Flight 19, a mission of immense danger undertaken to save their comrades. At 7:30 p.m., the pilot radioed in a routine departure message. It was the last time anyone would ever hear from them. 20 minutes later, a commercial tanker in the area reported seeing a massive fireball light up the night sky. The captain described a brilliant flash and an explosion that shot flames high into the air. When the tanker arrived at the location, the crew found only a wide slick of oil and gasoline spread across the churning, storm-tossed waves. There was no wreckage. There were no survivors. The Mariner and its 13-man crew had also vanished. The night's toll had risen to 6 aircraft and 27 men. The disappearance of 6 Navy aircraft and 27 crewmen in a single evening triggered one of the largest and most comprehensive air and sea searches in history. At its peak, the operation involved hundreds of Navy and Army aircraft and more than 20 ships, scouring 250,000 square miles of the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Florida coastline. For 5 days they searched. They flew meticulous grid patterns from dawn until dusk. Ships crisscrossed the search area, their crews scanning the waves for any sign of debris, any hint of the lost men. An oil slick, a piece of a wing, a life raft. They found nothing. Not a single piece of wreckage from any of the 6 aircraft was ever recovered. It was as if the planes and the men had been plucked from the sky, leaving no trace of their existence. The Navy's initial Board of Investigation placed the entire blame on Lieutenant Charles Taylor, citing pilot error and his critical misjudgment of his location. His mother, devastated by the loss of her son, refused to accept the verdict. She campaigned relentlessly, arguing the Navy was also at fault. After a second review, the Navy amended its findings. The final report absolved Taylor of blame, officially listing the cause of the incident as unknown. The story of Flight 19 became the foundation for one of the most enduring modern myths. Although reports of unexplained events in the region existed, the area had no name and no reputation. In 1964, a writer named Vincent Gaddis for a pulp adventure magazine first coined the phrase that would enter the global lexicon, the Bermuda Triangle. Gaddis used the story of Flight 19 as his centerpiece, describing a triangular region that has destroyed hundreds of ships and planes without a trace. The legend was solidified a decade later in 1974 when Charles Berlitz published his sensational bestseller, The Bermuda Triangle. The book sold over 20 million copies in 30 languages and linked the disappearances to supernatural forces, UFOs, and the lost city of Atlantis. Flight 19 was no longer just a tragic accident. It was Exhibit A in a grand paranormal conspiracy. Science offers more prosaic explanations for the dangers in that stretch of ocean. It is one of the most heavily traveled shipping lanes in the world, so a higher number of incidents is statistically likely. The area is known for its sudden, violent weather. The powerful Gulf Stream current can create treacherous sea conditions and carry away wreckage over vast distances. Geologists point to possible eruptions of methane gas from the ocean floor, which could create a froth of water that would instantly sink a ship. Others cite the region's unique magnetic anomalies and the Agonic Line, a place where true north and magnetic north align, potentially causing the initial compass failure that doomed Flight 19. The story of Flight 19 endures because it represents a fundamental human fear. It is the fear of the unknown, of being lost, and of vanishing from the world without a trace. It is a stark reminder that in the contest between human technology and the raw power of the natural world, the outcome is never guaranteed. The final truth of what happened on that December afternoon remains where it has for 8 decades, lost somewhere in the silence of the sea.